Our Bible reading today is from Mark chapter 3, verses 7 to 19. Jesus withdrew with the disciples to the lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed. When they heard all about what he was doing, many people came to him from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, and the regions across the Jordan and around Tyre and Sidon. Because of the crowd, he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him, to keep the people from crowding him. For he had healed many, so those with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. Whenever the impure spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." But he gave them strict orders not to tell others about him. Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. To them he gave the name Boanerges, which means son of thunder. Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him.
Good morning, my name is Matt and I'm the curate at St Francis, and today we're thinking about the commission of Jesus. You've just heard the reading, and just to give you some context, this is where it falls in our series. So far we thought about the good news of Jesus, the call of Jesus, the power of Jesus, the priorities of Jesus, the forgiveness of Jesus, the welcome and the humanity of Jesus. And today we think about the commission of Jesus. If you looked in a dictionary and you tried to look up the word commission, this is what it would say: a group of people entrusted by a government or other official body with authority to do something. So in reality, all of us have been commissioned. You've been commissioned if you're working for an employer. They've said, this is the job I want you to do, and you've been commissioned to do it. If you've had your kids baptised in our church or somewhere else, then you have commissioned the church, because partway through that service you say to the church, will you help us to help these children to grow in faith? And we say we do, in which case we've been commissioned, we've been given a role as a group of people, and that's what we're meant to be doing. Jesus was commissioned by God the Father. He was sent to the earth with a particular role to seek and to save the lost, as it says in Luke 19. That was his mission, to come and to live and to die and to rise again, so that we could all be forgiven, so that we could know the love of the Father and be restored to relationship with him. Right in our passage though today, we're right at the start of that mission. Already, as we know from Mark 3 verse 7, Jesus already had quite a few disciples. But this is the time when he's going to go up the mountain, and according to Luke, we know that Jesus spent the whole night there in prayer. I wonder what that looked like, what that conversation looked like. If any of you have had to choose a team or employ people, perhaps you too have prayed and you too have sought God and thought, I wonder, God, I wonder who are the people that you want on this team. I know certainly if I was Jesus, there is at least one that I'd want to have dropped from the team. But why does Jesus choose 12? You might have thought of that before. Well, the answer is because there were 12 tribes in Israel. And so Jesus, by choosing 12, is saying, this mission that I'm on, this group of people that I'm gathering into mission with me, it's not about a particular tiny group. Actually, it's about the whole of society. It's about the mission of the whole people of God. And so he goes up on the mountain and he prays, and he comes down and he calls to him. And it says he calls those who he desired. These were the people that Jesus wanted, that he chose. And he doesn't just choose them as his buddies. He doesn't just say, these are going to be my buddies, but he's choosing them in order for them to be sent out. That was already right there in the DNA of, as it is for us too. When we were called as Christians, we were not just called, as I'm sure we know, to sit and to be friends with God, but actually we were called to be sent out again. And that's what's going on with the disciples. They were called And then it says that they were called apostles or postals, those people who were to be sent. And they were sent to preach and to teach and to drive out demons and to heal people. They were sent out to change the world, that God was going to break in new ways, that his kingdom was going to come and his will was going to be done. And so who does Jesus recruit? Now, I've heard at least 4 sermons on this, and this is how the sermon usually goes. It says something like, Jesus chose these people, and broadly speaking, excuse the phrase, that these were a bunch of duffers. That Jesus chose these people who had no skills, no abilities, and somehow he morphs them into his dream team. And the sermon tends to end with, although it doesn't put it quite like this, we are also a bunch of duffers, and that Jesus calls us too. And in many ways, there's nothing wrong with that. Jesus' disciples, we know, had flaws. We know that we too have flaws and mistakes, and we know that God can use us disproportionately, that he can use us much more than we think we can be used, that he takes what we offer and he can make much more out of it. And of course, this is true, as it says in John 15, that we can do nothing without Jesus, as it's talking about the vine. But I wonder just how accurate this is as a picture of the disciples. So let's just have a quick wander through who the disciples were. I wonder if I asked you to name the 12, how you'd get on. It's not as easy as you'd think, at least in part because sometimes they're called slightly different names in different accounts of the Gospels. So here we go. This is a quick whistle-stop tour of who they were. So first of all, we've got 3 lots of 2 brothers. Simon Peter and Andrew are the first 2 sons of Jonas. Simon Peter, whom Jesus says, you are the rock on whom I'll build my church. That's why his name is changed to being Peter. And along with his brother, they're both fishermen. He is seen as the leader amongst the disciples, particularly after Jesus ascends. And that's really interesting because he isn't the most learned, he's not the most educated, and yet there was clearly something impressive about him. Peter is the one who talks during the beginning of the book of Acts. He's the one when other people approach the disciples, they recognise that he is the leader. There's something striking about him. He's able to talk really clearly. He's a man of incredible faith. He steps out of the boat to go and walk on the water with Jesus. He's one of the first to say, you are the Christ, I recognise who you are. He stands up in the face of persecution, and he is an amazing leader and a martyr for his faith. Then we've got Andrew, his brother, again a fisherman. He was a disciple of John the Baptist first. And again, that's remarkable that someone from a fishing background would have said, I'm going to go and follow, first of all, John the Baptist, and then when John the Baptist says, I've recognised Jesus is the Messiah, Andrew then switches over and becomes one of Jesus' disciples. We know that after Jesus' resurrection, that he goes into Greece and Asia Minor, and tradition has it that he led the governor of Achaea's wife to faith and healed her at the same time. And because of that, the governor of Achaea had him killed. Even though it's very common for people to say that Peter was the first to understand that Jesus was the Messiah, actually we realise that Simon had it far earlier. Even in John chapter 1 he says to Peter, we have found the Messiah, the Christ. And it takes Peter another 8 or so chapters to clock that for himself. Our next 2 brothers, James and Jude, or Thaddeus, the sons of Alphaeus. James is a minor figure. He's often called James the Lesser. He writes the book of James, and once Jesus had ascended, he travelled throughout Palestine and Egypt preaching until he himself was eventually crucified. Some accounts say that he was sawn in 2, which may be what is referred to in Hebrews chapter 11 when it talks about what happened to some of the early Christians. Jude and Thaddeus, we know even less about him. He pops up a few times, most notably in John 14, where he asks Jesus why he is not going to reveal himself to more people. Tradition holds that he went to Judea, Samaria, Syria and Libya. Then we come to our next 2 brothers, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, some of Jesus' really tight inner circle. James is often called James the Elder, another fisherman. His name never appears without that of his brother. He was the first to be martyred for his faith. And their desire as brothers, you may remember, is to sit either side of Jesus in heaven. John, his brother, was the author of John's Gospel, as well as John's epistles 1, 2 and 3 John, and the book of Revelation. We know that he was a very learned man, despite being a fisherman. He was considered a pillar of the church, and even some of the early church leaders who come after him will often say it was John who helped them to really get established. Moving on, we have Bartholomew Nathaniel, possibly has a royal sort of connection to him. He is thought to have gone as far as India preaching. He was known as a scholar who studied the law and the prophets. And Jesus says of him, "Behold, an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Then we come on to the bad penny of the bunch, Judas Iscariot, and we think that he was the only one who wasn't a Galilean. He came from Judea. We learn in John 12 that he was the keeper of the money bag, although he used to steal from it. But even, I suppose, with him, we can see that there was some good, because he felt remorse after betraying Jesus, even so that he killed himself. Thomas Didymus, or the other Judas, understandably doesn't often use the word Judas to describe himself. Although he is referred to as Doubting Thomas, actually the other disciples had received proof already, and he was only asking for the same sort of thing. We think that he went on and he preached to the Parthians in India. He was a man of great courage and prepared to go with Jesus to Judea, even though there was danger that he was going to face there. Matthew, or Levi, he's sometimes called, was the author of the Gospel of Matthew. He was a tax collector who turned his life around when he encountered Jesus. Remarkable that he left what would have been a very affluent profession in order to follow Jesus. A skilled person with money, somebody who would have known his way around society. And he goes off and he starts churches in Ethiopia and Africa and dies there as a martyr. Philip was the only one of the disciples who Jesus finds, rather than being brought by somebody else. There isn't an awful lot of him in the Gospels, and the same with Simon the Zealot. Again, we know fairly little about these guys. But when you look at the whole picture, you see that Jesus chose and equipped some remarkable people. With the Holy Spirit, they travelled far and wide. They faced opposition, but they stood up in front of leaders and rulers. They were able to start churches. They were able to do amazing miracles. They were able to speak with clarity in public. These were people of practical skill, people who could handle money, people of daring and courage. They were people who knew what their life was meant to be about, people of bravery. Looking out at many of you in church and also online, I know from many of you that you have a great number of practical skills. Many of you have chosen to follow Jesus with conviction. Many of you, when you heard his call, like the disciples, you got up and you followed him. Some of you find yourselves, as they did, serving God in ways that you would not have expected. And just like the disciples, we use all that God has given us in his service. My question to you this morning is, do you have a vision for your life and what God has called you to? I've been in quite a few organisations and churches, and I can't tell you how many times I've sat in meetings devising vision statements, plans of action. What are we going to try and achieve? What's God called us to? But you know, the visions and the callings and the aims that I'd be most interested in hearing about would be yours. Where has God put you? What is your vision for how you want to see your workplace, your home, your school change? What are the things that you're praying about that would change in that place? What are the skills that God has given you, the abilities that you have that he would want to use in that place? For each of us have been commissioned. We've all been told, go make disciples. We've all been told, go and try and see the world change into how God wants it to be. And so let's just take a moment this morning to think about that question. What is your vision for your life? It took Jesus a long time to discover his. He needed to go up onto the mountain to decide who he would work with and listen to the Father. Perhaps that's our challenge this week, to ask the Father again, during this period and in the years to come, where have you put me? What's the vision that you want me to be living my life for? What change do you want me to see? And how are you going to use all that you've given me to help that to happen?